Sometimes the path we end up taking isn't the one we planned. It's the one that quietly unfolds when we say yes to the unknown. This week I'm joined by Outlaw number 39, Andy Brown, Global Business Development and Relationships Director at the Toro Company. Andy's story is proof that life's biggest opportunities often come from unexpected turns, from moments of failure, chance encounters, and the courage to keep moving forward. This conversation is about what happens after those moments, how saying yes to opportunity, embracing the unknown, and staying curious can lead to a life of purpose. This is Outlaw number 39. So, without a further ado, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Okay, Andy, you are Outlaw number 39. Welcome to the Valley of Outlaws podcast. Thank you for coming on. I always start the podcast in the same way and allow my guests to introduce yourself to the audience. So in your own words, who are you, what do you do, and why do you do what you do?
Okay, well, that's quite a deep question straight off the bat, so we'll keep it simple. My name's Andy Brown. I work for the Toro Company, and we, certainly the area that I work in, is based around golf and sports and providing machines and irrigation to maintain sports turf. Mm-hmm. So company's been around for a very long time, since 1914. I've been with them for 27 years. Wow. So I'm probably just about, once I got to 20 years, I was no longer considered a new boy. And, you know, that is a strange thing to say, but people tend to, when they work for Toro, they tend to stay for a long time. Okay. I just recently had 3 of my colleagues retire, and the 4 of us were sitting around a table, and between us, we had over 120 years worth of Toro tenureship. Wow. And that, you know, why is that? Well, we can get into that a little bit, but what do I do specifically? So currently, my job title is Global Business Development and Relationships. I'm still trying to work out what that means, as does indeed my wife is trying to work out what that means. But really, what I do is I work with our biggest customers, clients, and repeat customers around the world, specifically or predominantly in golf, so golf development. And I work with all of our other sales teams around the world and also our distributors to help them sort of create a continuity, if you like, in terms of how we manage our relationship with customers who work in multiple regions. So there are a lot of our customers who would own golf courses or operate golf courses all over the world. So from the US through Europe and into Asia and potentially elsewhere as well. And of course, if they work with Toro in one of those regions, they have a degree of expectation about how that would work in other areas. So you need to have a continuity of strategy and the way in which we work with them. So I help to sort of create that continuity. Okay. And I'm a point of contact for many of them. And that's where the relationship piece comes in. We build very, very long-term relationships with many of our clients. And that was why when I joined Toro in 2000, end of 99 into 2000, it was to take on some of our major client relationships that had grown to a point where they needed somebody to be that point person. And that's why I was asked to come on board.
And was that journey to Toro was it an industry you were always interested in as a youngster, as a child? Like when you were at school, did you think I'm going to get into the irrigation industries?
Absolutely not. Not even golf. I mean, I had nobody in my life who was a golfer. Yeah. I had an uncle who played golf, but I didn't spend time with him, so I wasn't aware. I mean, I was into all my other sports. You know, I was a rugby player, football player, played cricket. You know, and I went to a state school in Oxfordshire, and you know, just had a normal childhood in that respect. And I was very busy playing all those different sports. I didn't have, I think, like most boys in that sort of that age range, didn't really have an idea. If I wasn't going to be a professional footballer or something, then I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'd always actually was quite interested in space from a very early age. So that was something that, you know, the concept of being an astronaut was there. And at one point I decided I might want to go into the military. I suppose this is probably a story which I'd have to sort of edit it a little bit, or at least self edit it, because some of the expletives that were thrown at me after I did this was but anyway, I went to the Army Careers Office when I was 16 years old in Oxford.
Oh, wow.
And I went in there because I was interested in becoming a PTI, physical training instructor, because I love my sport, and I thought, okay, that could be quite an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I didn't tell my parents I was going to do this, so I just was in Oxford and I just went to the careers office.
Yeah.
And there was an officer there who's a major. He had his full uniform on and everything, and we had very happy to have a conversation. And he was telling me, was asking me first of all what I wanted to do, and I said I was quite interested in being a PTI, but I was thinking I'd go to university or something like that. So he explained what that process might look like, and then what I would do afterwards, and Sandhurst, and all this basic training and all this sort of thing. And obviously after a while he looked at me and he said, "Have you got any questions?" And I said, "Well, yes, I do." And he said, "Well, what?" And I said, "Well, is there any chance I could join at your rank?" And he looked at me as if I was a bit crazy, and he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you've explained everything, and all this basic training doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So if I just joined at your rank, presumably I wouldn't have to do it." And he looked at me and he just said, "I don't think you're really serious about this, are you?" And I went, "Not really." So he gave me a couple of expletives and told me to go on my way. So that, and I look back at that and I think, okay, first of all, pretty dumb thing for me to say, but that was just the way I was when I was 16 years old. But also probably missed a trick there, because actually in some ways I think I would have enjoyed being in the military. Mm-hmm. And I've got a lot of friends who have gone down that route and still friends today. And, they all say, "Oh, you'd have really enjoyed it." I say, "Yeah, probably I would have done." But anyway, chose not to and didn't take that path. But going through school, no, I didn't really have a clear idea. And in fact, at the end of school, so I did my O-levels, and then I had my first go at A-levels. And I guess that's a critical thing. And, I always feel very, I have a son, he's 26, and, he went through A-levels. And of course, everyone has family that are going through at different times. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge moment in a child's life, when they are trying to work out what they want to do, and then also trying to work out if education is something they want to continue with and all the rest of it. And I thought I was better than I was. Mm-hmm. And I got probably the most valuable lesson when I took my A-levels the first time by basically not doing very well. And, as a result of that, I could not go on to university. I'd already, been applied for a university, and I got accepted, didn't get the grades. Okay. So I had a massive sort of wake-up call. And the wake-up call was, you're not as good as you think you are. You haven't worked as hard as you actually should have done. And now you've got a big decision to make. And I suppose the decision I made was to stay on at school and do another year. Wow. Okay. Which for me, I'd been, captain of the football team, rugby team. I'd been quite, I've been very prominent in the school. And so from a pride point of view, it was quite a moment. But I thought, no, okay, I do need to do that. So I stayed on an extra year, which had a lot of complications from a family perspective. And then I did something which probably started everything off for me, which was I went and enrolled with Camp America in the US. Okay. And so that final summer so we're talking now 1985, I went off to America for 3 months. First 2 months was to be a football coach in a camp up in New Hampshire. And it was such a change to everything I'd been doing. The life being on camp was very different. First of all, the whole being away from home, meeting lots of new people, meeting some, being surrounded by very positive people, completely changed. I'd had a really tough year. I hadn't really enjoyed it. And I was just escaping, really. So I did that and had the most incredible time. I did 2 months on the camp, which was amazing, up in New England. And then I had a month traveling around the US on Trailways buses. I did 4,500 miles on buses with 2 other English guys. Yeah. And we went all the way down the East Coast, across to New Orleans, up to Chicago and back across to Washington, and had adventures all the way around. I mean, I could literally write a book about from the minute I arrived in New York, or not arriving in New York because the plane got diverted to Bangor Airport, US Air Force Base. Ended up spending the first night in a police station because I couldn't find anywhere to stay. turned up at the camp. They all thought I'd been arrested as soon as I'd worked in America. So of course I hadn't, but they all just thought I was a hero. So, suddenly I'd had this status already, to multiple things. But so as I was going around there and traveling around the States, I phoned home. Of course, no mobile phones in those days, no. So I was writing letters and then actually phoned home to find out if I'd passed my A-levels for the second time, which I had, much to my surprise. But anyway, I did. And my father said to me, do you want me to accept your place for you? Are you coming home? Because I'd written a long letter to him saying, I'm not sure I'm coming home. And he gave me some wonderful advice. And I suppose and now being a parent, you hope that your child is going to listen to something you tell them. And this was something I did tell him. And we'd had a bit of a complicated relationship up to that point. It had just been he and I going through that last year together, and there'd been some challenges and stuff like that. But anyway, he said to me, are you coming home? And I said, I really don't know. And he said, well, why don't I accept the place on your behalf, and you think about it and let me know in 2 weeks' time whether I come to the airport to pick you up. But he said, my advice would be come back, try it. And if you don't like it, then at least you've tried it. And if you do like it, well, then that's fine. And it was and they needed to put no more pressure on me, which was great. So I went away, had my final 2 weeks of madness going around America, which was absolutely incredible. I had offered job offers at Disney. I had job offers to go to the Caribbean. Seriously. I mean, honestly, it did help. 19 years old with an English accent. It helped. Yeah. But anyway, I was having a great time. But in the end, it worked its way through, you should come back and just try it. So that's what I did. And I came home. I literally had about 5 days before I was due to go to university. Turned up in London. I went to St. Mary's College in Twickenham in London and met my wife.
Oh, wow.
Met the girl that would become my wife. She was the very first person I met.
Wow.
And we've been together for 40 years.
Wow.
So he's got a lot to answer for that, obviously. But, it was one of those moments where, sliding door moments, and of which everybody has many of them. And I definitely have 3 or 4 that where things would have gone very differently. But turning up there, and the thing that then, my period at university then, which was very important for me, I was already in a different space from where I'd been at school. So I'd had this experience, and now I went to do geography and sports science. I loved my sport, but geography was basically the only thing I knew what to do. I knew what I was doing, and it interested me because it brought together lots of different other areas, subject areas. And I was never a specialist in anything, and I've never been a specialist in anything, but I've been quite good at being able to dip in and out of lots of different disciplines and understand them, and then, be the person in the middle who can maybe talk to each of those different disciplines. And that's really what I've ended up doing. So being in sort of like a project management role, if you like. And so my time at university helped me develop those sort of skills, if you like. And then the second big moment, I don't know about you, but I think everybody, if they think hard about it, there is literally one moment where they could say everything else led from there. And for me, that was, I can even tell you the day and the date. So it was Tuesday, the 6th of January, 1986.
Wow.
And it was a decision I made as I was lying in my room in the old house accommodation at St. Mary's with a hangover. And it was a Thursday morning. Thursday morning, not a Tuesday, but Thursday morning. And it was the morning after our Wednesday rugby match and night in the bar. So I was a little bit feeling the worse for wear. And I had a lecture I was supposed to go to, which I needed to get up for. And I decided to get up. Now, it's that decision that makes everything on there, change everything. Because the decision to go to this lecture meant that I met a previous student had come back to give a lecture. Her name was Dee Smith. And she'd been at the university probably about 10 years prior to me. And she was now working for an aid agency called Action Aid. And she was based up in northern Kenya, right up in the north, in the Kerio Valley, in the Rift Valley of Kenya. And she was coming back to talk about what she was doing. She was building schools and clinics and whatever for a tribe called the Pokot. So I listened to this lecture, and she showed these amazing photographs of this part of Kenya. And I'd always wanted to go to Kenya because my aunt and uncle had spent many years there, and I listened as a child to some of the stories. He'd been a soldier in the King's African Rifles in the 60s and spent a lot of time in Kenya. And there was wonderful stories of there used to be a TV show on in those days called Dactari, which you're far too young to know anything about, with Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion. So if anybody of my age, they'll know what I'm talking about. And so I watched that as a kid. And anyway, so Kenya was a place I always wanted to go to. So anyway, I listened to her, and it was absolutely amazing what she was doing. So I went up to her afterwards and said, look, it's just wonderful. Really enjoyed listening to you. And it's a place I've always wanted to go to. So she looked at me and she called my bluff, and she said, well, why don't you come out? Mm-hmm. So I thought about it for a little bit, and I thought, well, okay, yeah, no, that might be quite good fun. So I spoke to my head of geography department, a guy called Kevin Cook, and I said, look, Dee's suggested that maybe I come out and see what she's doing. And he said, oh, it's a great idea. So this is my first year, so second term. And he said, well, whilst you're there, you could do the research for your third year thesis in geography that you should do. And if you're going to go, I'll come out at some point as well, because I need to go and visit the project because we're helping support it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I did. So I raised some money. I went to the UN in the UK, the UN Association, and did a presentation to them to explain what I was going to do and would they help fund it. Mm-hmm. I went to a couple of other organizations as well, and they gave me a bit of money. So I actually had enough money to, first of all, buy a plane ticket, but also, give some money to the project and things like that. So I went out and I spent 3 months out there, right up in, you imagine, I'm going from rural Oxfordshire to the Kerio Valley in the Rift Valley, living with the Pokot tribe. Mm-hmm. And you have to imagine that they were literally still living in their traditional huts. It was bows and arrows and drinking, cow's blood in sour milk, very, very traditional. Mm-hmm. And no electricity, no running water. It was pit latrines and wells and this sort of thing. And I went there for 2 months and I did a research project on how they were now the government were making them, they were a nomadic tribe, but they were being made to stay in one place. So they were being asked to grow their own food. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly water became a big issue for them. So I did a research project on how they managed their water within the tribe. Wow. And basically they had a series of allotments, as they called them, shambas, and they controlled how much water each individual got to grow their crops. So I interviewed all the farmers, and I obviously had an interpreter, and I developed this sort of concept, if you like, for a project. So I spent 2 months living there, and then traveled around Kenya with Dee and one of her friends as well. So really an incredibly formative moment. And that led me to, obviously, irrigation then became a thread through my life. So it was that decision to do that decision to go to that lecture that led to everything else. That's
a lot of questions that come up in my mind. A lot. First one, I'm really interested in the relationship between a child and a parent and these kind of things. And I am, because he always tells me to stop throwing him under the bus in some ways, but I'm not going to throw him under the bus. But from when I was choosing a career and that kind of thing, my dad was always giving me advice of choose something where you can have some sort of safety and some sort of career guarantee. I wanted to do art as my kind of thing, and he pushed me into architecture because that was more of a stable career path. Like for you, having a relationship with your dad where he gave you that freedom to say come and try, and if it doesn't work you can go do something else, and also having the ability to let you go and travel before you went to university to do that, how informative was that for you in terms of being able to grow into, I guess, a person you were slowly going to become, and without having any of the fears, which may be of the uncertainty of getting a career? I'll carry on. I was at my old school doing helping with their future program and trying to elevate it and improve it. And there was a few parents there who were going, my kid needs to be doing work experience every week, every holiday. They need to be doing enforced kind of training to get them to be more proactive. And you can feel the fear in parents. And for me, I think that's limiting to the child. But like, you having experience with your dad was there a balance of that? Or
well, there is now, because obviously I'm a parent myself, and I've gone through it with my son, as I say, he's now 26. So we've gone through exactly the same thing that I went through. I think it's obviously it's a balance. Yeah. Kids need to have some boundaries. Yes. As when you are a parent for the first time and you're learning what that means, you suddenly realize all the things that your parents told you and were trying to do to you had some value. But you may well just try to do it slightly differently for all the other influences that you've experienced yourself, and you do it slightly differently. But there's absolutely no doubt that giving an individual the freedom to make some of their own decisions and also make, therefore, some of their own mistakes, but equally own some of their own successes, because there is a danger that we do prescribe to our children that they should go down a particular route. And if they do it and they're successful, well, to a certain extent, it's down to you, maybe. Or at least the child might think that they don't own that success as much because it wasn't really their decision. And yes, it's worked out, but maybe they'd have been successful doing something else. So giving a child the opportunity to try something and be successful and own that success, I think is really important. So if you are too prescriptive, okay, you must do this, you must do that, and here's a whole list of things which will make your life easy and it will be successful and you'll be great, is potentially counterproductive because you're not giving the individual the chance to sort of explore and work those things out for themselves. And so it's a balance. It's definitely a balance. So when I look back at my father and my mother, what they were very, very good at was not telling us, any of us as children, what we should do. And each of us went a slightly different direction. Although I'm the only non-creative person in my family. I've never drawn anything in my life since I left school, I don't think. And I've a bit of photography and stuff like that. And I can put together a good composition for a photograph and stuff, but in terms of actually any creative skills, pretty limited. And part of that is because because I believe I don't have it, I don't try. And therefore, if I don't try, obviously. So,
closed off.
Whereas my brother went to the Royal College of Art.
Okay.
My sister's a fashion designer. My dad was a professional industrial photographer. My mum was a music teacher and then became a headmistress. So they all had creative elements.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because also having parents like that, in some ways you feel that I've spoken to a few people where that having creative parents, they've influenced their kids to go and follow similar paths, whether it is music or those kind of things. But actually, there's another element where there are some creative parents who also needed the freedom themselves. And so they understand that they needed the freedom themselves to figure out how they were going to build their lives. And I think it is such an interesting balance with the parenting, for sure.
You've got all that to come.
Oh, wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do.
Maybe.
We'll see. Next question was, I did a gap year and I found going to different cultures was completely eye-opening and kind of puts your life into perspective, actually how privileged we are. For you, what was it like going to America in that sense of just for you opening your eyes to a different kind of Western culture and then going to Kenya as well and seeing the extreme differences?
Well, it was consecutive summers. Okay. So it was the summer of 85, I went to America, and the summer of 86, I went to Kenya. Yeah. And you could not have had two bigger contrasting experiences. The trip to America was huge because it was the first time I traveled on my own. And in fact, as a child, we didn't do a lot of holidays, foreign holidays and things. The first time I went abroad, I went on a football trip when I was 11 or something to Holland. But as a family, we didn't go on a foreign holiday. So 16 was the first time I got on an airplane. And so for me, that trip to America was massively liberating. As I said, I was surrounded by very positive people of my own age. The organization was very well run. We had huge number of opportunities. I went whale watching. I went whitewater rafting. I did, all sorts of things which you do. And I would highly recommend people, and my son did it. And I said this, I gave my son, I suggested that he do that because he was also at a place where he wasn't sure quite where he wanted to go. And I just thought, well, that would be something. And he had a wonderful time. And he did actually, I think he did at least 3 years. He might have done 4 actually. Over a period of time, and I only just did the one, but I would highly recommend, that sort of 18, 19-year-old, and there are some incredible camps that you can go and sign up for, and they allow, depending on where your skills are, and some of them are sport focused, some of them are creative focused, and whatever, and you've got lots of options. But I do think that is, and there are, that's a very well organized setup in America with the Camp America. But there are other places, and there are even things here in the UK that you can do. But that element of travel afterwards, and you're also meeting lots of different nationalities because it's not, they always take a cohort of international counselors. So you'll have, but obviously they need to be speaking English, but there are going to be French guys, people there.
Yeah.
There's going to be all sorts of different Europeans as well as, Americans as well.
Yeah.
So it was hugely, and then the travel part and the people you meet when you're traveling. I mean, you spend that amount of time on buses, you see real America. And I just had some of the most incredible conversations with people who were traveling between, Fort Lauderdale and New Orleans, you can imagine, or going up towards Nashville and stuff like that. It's absolutely amazing. So that was important. I think the trip to Kenya was on so many other levels, particularly in terms of culturally. I came from a very, very traditional, sort of country background, if you like, in a small rural town in Oxfordshire. And so there was very little multicultural exposure, although, we did have families from who'd come from different groups and whatever, and that was fine, but it wasn't anything like I'd experienced when I went to Kenya. Now, I had a little bit of experience being overseas. My mother at this point was now running a school in the United Arab Emirates.
Oh, wow.
So she was a headmistress of a school on the Saudi border, just south of Abu Dhabi, in a place called Ruwais. And I ended up having my 18th birthday there, which is a pretty unusual place to say you had an 18th birthday.
Especially when you want to drink alcohol.
Well, you're okay there because in UAE you can.
Of course.
But I played rugby there as well. So it was my first. So I was a rugby player, and this was where was I at that point? So I was just again in that transition of going to America and then going to university. And so I ended up playing rugby, and it was all on sand in those days there. And I played for Ruwais against Abu Dhabi. And then the following year, they asked me to come back because they'd qualified for the Dubai Sevens. So I went back there, and we drove from the Saudi border all the way up to Dubai, which is quite a long way. And it's different now because it's all built up. But in those days, you're basically going through the desert. And I played in the Dubai Sevens, again on sand. And I was 19 years old. And it was just the most amazing experience.
Yeah.
It was actually that same period before I went to Kenya. So it was in that sort of January, February timeframe. And I just, I remember turning up at the hotel there, and there's one big hotel in the old part of Dubai called the Hyatt Regency. And I turned up, and I'm standing in the reception and with my guys, and I'm behind this enormous group of guys. And it turns out they're the All Blacks. So they turn around and, it's like, who are you? And rugby's a very inclusive. Yeah. So, obviously we were part of the event. So they didn't know who we were. They didn't recognize us, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And we said, we're Ruwais. We're one of the local teams that have qualified. And they said, and they introduced themselves, and, and they said, right, you guys are with us. So we went up with them, and we spent the night with them on the rooftop in a big barbecue. So I spent the night with the All Blacks.
Wow.
As a 19-year-old. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we didn't get to play them because I think they'd have killed us. But we were one game away from ended up getting into a round where we'd have played them.
Oh, wow.
And I'm quite pleased
Relieved.
that we didn't. Yes.
So once you had an interest in water from Kenya, like how did that then trickle, pardon the pun, forward to taking a career in yoga? Like, what was your next steps after that when you went back to university?
Well, I finished during that, having to put that together, the thesis and everything, I got to know some people at the Institute of Hydrology who were in Wallingford.
Okay.
And they had been in that area, and they had done small scale irrigation projects and things like that. So they were a good source of information for my background and everything when you're putting a thesis together. So I got to know them, and over time they said, well, look, are you interested in this as a career? And I said, well, possibly, still trying to work it out. I was toying up between, I wanted to travel. Yeah. I wanted to work overseas. I wanted to have something that gave me an opportunity to travel. But I thought oil or potentially water. I wasn't a chemist. Yeah. And I didn't want to end up in the North Sea or in the middle of a desert somewhere. So I chose water, and funnily enough, ended up in a desert because what I did was I then went on to I was recommended to go and do a master's degree. Yeah. And of course, here's the irony. So 4 years previously, I'd failed my A-levels. Wind it forward, and I'm now applying to do a master's degree. Yeah. That's bizarre. Yeah. But that just proves how when you finally find something you're interested in, it can spark you both intellectually and also from a work ethic point of view. Yeah. And as I pointed out, I was not the hardest worker at school, and I thought I was better than I was. And that's something that we all need to learn is actually where we really are in the world and from our own perspective. And I learnt it young, which I think was very helpful. It cost me a year, but it didn't cost me too much.
Yeah.
And so I went on to a small college just north of Luton, called Silsoe College, as part of Cranfield University.
Oh, okay.
And I specialised in an irrigation project management master's degree. Again, I see myself, and always have done, as being the guy in the middle working with everybody else, rather than being a specialist, whether it be economics or management or engineering or things like that. You have to be able to work with all of them. And this college was incredible because it had 73 different nationalities there when I went. It was 1990. And I did this course, but you were mixing with everybody. And there were only 1,500 students there, and it specialized in postgraduate degrees, PhDs and MScs. And people came from all over the world to it because it was a real specialist place. So you met just the most incredible people. And of course, 1990 was a World Cup football year. So we had every country in the World Cup represented there, except for Argentina. And so the first game that year was Cameroon against Argentina. So we all got together every night to watch the World Cup matches. And of course, Cameroon won 1-0 in that first game, which was the most incredible thing. And so the party that night was unbelievable. And so, we just I had a year like that. It was absolutely incredible. And I made lots and lots of friends from all over the world. And one of the things that happened there, again, sliding door moment, was the head of our engineering department was a guy called Melvin Kay. And he said to me, probably in, 2/3 of the way through the course, he said, have you got any idea what you want to do when you leave? And I said, well, not really. I, just sort of hoping I can find something. And he said, well, I'm involved in a project with the Overseas Development Administration. So this was our government aid agency at the time. It's now called the Department for International Development, in Egypt.
Okay.
And it's an agricultural development. So it's a school educating agricultural engineers, particularly in irrigation. And I'm going to be I'm designing an irrigation sort of training facility, as well as they're building this big farm, and all these different irrigation techniques have got to be put in there, and they need somebody on site. And we think it's perfect for a newly graduated student, MSc student or something that's got some experience of traveling overseas. Would you be interested? And I went, yeah, why not? So I went down and had an interview with the ODA. They seemed to be quite happy with the concept of that. And they said, assuming you graduate, we'd like to offer you the job. So now it was a case of, what have I done? What have I agreed to? So I graduated, and it took long. These things, I was supposed to leave sometime in October of that year. I didn't graduate until the first week in October. I literally had 2 weeks to get myself together. And my girlfriend, who I was with from my previous, from university, she was a teacher by now.
Yeah. And
I said to her, look, I'm going to go. Do you want to come with me?
Yeah.
And she went, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this was a test for us.
Yeah.
We were actually told, and this is quite funny. So we were actually told by the ODA, because of course we're working for the Foreign Office effectively. And they said, well, if you get married before you go, we'll pay for Nikki's travel and everything. And it's good for tax and all the rest of it. And so I said this to Nikki, and she said, I am not getting married just for a tax break. I said, okay, that's fair enough. So we paid for her flight.
Yeah.
I told her, look, you cost us some money there. But anyway, so she came with me, and we were there initially on a 2-year contract, and we were out on the Suez Canal in a town called Ismailia, the middle city of three. You've got Port Said in the north, Suez in the south, and Ismailia, where the Port Authority are based. So the Suez Canal Port Authority. And I went to work on this project, and I was the only expat there. I was 24 years old, and I was working with 200 Egyptians, only of which about 5 of them spoke English. And it was a massive challenge. And if you think about, so I went there in October of 1990, and the first Gulf War kicked off in January of 1981.
Wow, okay.
So we were right in the middle of a military zone. And so there was an awful lot going on around us as well. So we had all that to contend with, as well as suddenly I was I was effectively the project leader from the British side.
Wow.
And I had to work with both the people on site, but then also the Egyptian Ministry of Education, and various other government agencies as well. So at 24 years old, that was a massive.
And what was your goal, sorry, for that kind of project? That was that
To build this farm,
yeah,
to install all these different irrigation techniques, to move them from flood irrigation to drip irrigation and other forms as well, and then train all the agricultural engineers that were coming through from all the other agricultural schools around Egypt, so that they could go out into the deserts and grow food for the country. So it was
fascinating.
Yeah, and I obviously don't have a farming background.
Yeah,
I barely knew one end of a pipe from another.
Yeah,
I mean, if ever there was a situation where you are running as fast as you can to stay ahead of what's going on in front of you, to at least retain some credibility. I think it's called imposter syndrome, where you are definitely faking it until you make it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely a moment like that. And if it hadn't been for obviously the support of Nikki, and I had consultants coming in, and Melvin Kay, my engineering head of department, he was still involved in the project. I mean, they gave me an enormous amount of support, but it was a massive learning curve, very, very fast.
And huge responsibility as well, because you're educating a region.
Yes, and I remember obviously the language was an issue. I was supposed to have had a chance to have like a months long intensive language course. No chance. I didn't have one lesson before I went, so I had to have lessons while I was there.
Yeah.
And I was talking, I was having to communicate with people on the ground who didn't speak a word of English.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty challenging. But I met somebody on that project who had a profound influence on me, not just then, but going through the rest of my life. And his name was Mohammed Abdul Khalik. Yeah. And he was working for the school, and he was their senior sort of technician.
Yeah.
So I was 24 and he was probably 45. Okay. So he was twice my age.
Yeah.
Didn't speak a word of English. And he was the man on the project. And then suddenly this kid turns up, right? And, we couldn't communicate. And suddenly we were a team. We were supposed to work together. And it was a really incredible experience for me, because first of all, what an individual. From he was learning English, I was learning Arabic. We got to a point where we could communicate. In fact, by the time I left, which in the end was nearly 4 years later, we were sitting underneath his mango tree having philosophical conversations,
really?
Which is remarkable. Wow. Now, predominantly that was in English, because his English was much better than ever my Arabic was. But he was somebody that I learned so much from, and continue to apply some of those principles to this day. He's passed away now, unfortunately. But he was such a calm individual. He was such a thoughtful man. In fact, he came over to the UK to do a course at Silso, and that's where he also had an intensive language course. And in fact, he came to our wedding, which was wonderful. And to this day, as I say, I apply principles that he taught me. The first one being patience. And as a young person, and again, I see this in my own son and others, patience is such an important thing. His generation, your generation, maybe are a little bit impatient and want everything now and want to achieve everything now. It doesn't work out that way. You'll find out.
Yeah.
And having patience, both in terms of where you are and what you're doing, but equally how you deal with other people is so important. One of the challenges I had was once a month I had to go and meet the Minister of Education in the Mugama building in Cairo, which is this enormous building, 5,000 people work in it. Wow. I once tried to work out how many cups of tea and teaspoons of sugar were consumed per day in that place, because that's what they do. But anyway, I used to have to go there once a month, and I would be told to be in the anteroom of his office at 8 o'clock in the morning on that specific day, but no time at which I was going to meet him. So I could literally be there for 8 hours. Wow. And I would see him at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. Or I could see him at 8:30. That's the point. So I would turn, after a couple of times I'd done that, and I've been literally sitting there for 4 or 5 hours, I were okay, this is crazy. So what I prepared, I didn't have anything, there's no internet, so I had no phone to play around on. So I would walk, as I would walk to the Megama, I would go past this kiosk in the Marriott Hotel, which sold The Economist and the National Geographic. And I would buy both copies, and I would sit in his anteroom, and I would literally read it cover to cover. Yeah. and I didn't, you know how we flip through
Yeah,
magazines? No, don't do any of that. You'll get to that. You've got loads of time.
Yeah.
So you start top left-hand corner of the front cover and read everything, turn it over, read everything, read it. I knew where the magazine was published. I knew what it cost in every country in the world and all this sort of stuff because I just had hours. And I literally educated myself
through that.
But also learnt to be patient.
Yeah.
And that stood me in a lot of very, very good stead while I was there and has done since so as well.
That's very interesting because I think it's also it's patience and the perseverance as well as your communication with mentor. The time you need the patience to be able to build that relationship, but also the perseverance to keep wanting to try to actually communicate and work together better and better as time.
Yes, and the one of the key things he taught me was how to approach a problem.
Okay.
And how to approach a task. And it distills down into there are basically two ways of doing things. And you could say the right way or the wrong way, but it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. Even if you've worked out a way to achieve what you want to achieve, there are still two ways of doing it. There's the quick way, the expedient way, and the way you'd like to do it. And then there's the right way.
Yeah.
There's the way that probably takes a little bit more time, probably takes a bit more preparation and a bit more attention to detail, but in the end is the right way and will be the success, make for the most success.
Yeah.
And he taught me that because I was young, we had things to do, I just wanted to get them done. And he would rein me back in and we would talk it through and he would say, yes, we could do it that way, but if we did it this way, then we'll only do it once. And then we can move on.
I bet also that is so applicable to everything which went on through Toro.
Everything.
Everything, every
well,
decision
think about it in your own life.
Yeah.
If you approach it like that, I mean, even about looking after yourself and looking after your house and looking at whatever, there are things that you can do that just keep things ticking along. Or there are things that you can do that actually enhance your life or indeed just keep things at a good standard. And if you apply that same principle to any problem that you have, actually, it won't steer you wrong. It might take a little longer. You might need to invest a bit more time, maybe a bit more resource as well. But at the end of the day, you know it's the right way to go. So to this day, as I say, he's passed away now. But if I'm confronted with something that requires me to think like that, what would Mohammed do? Yeah. Seriously, that's what I think. I mean, I can see him right here, right now.
Wow. It's one of the, again, so yesterday, this thing we talked about, how it feels like this younger generation has less of an opportunity to have real mentors because younger people, they're going into work, they're going into the workplace and they feel like they have to deliver from the moment they're there. Their time to grow into something is a lot less. And having also the mentor who's willing to give the time to the junior who doesn't know what they're doing is going to mess up again. It's just not, it doesn't exist as much anymore.
No, it doesn't. And that is also a fault of, my generation as it is your generation, or indeed the generation above me, my father and his generation, because we don't invest enough in the people coming through.
Yeah.
Succession planning in an organization is probably the weakest part of any organization.
Yeah.
You're so focused on the here and now and the requirement to deliver, whether it's on a number, whether it's on a project, whatever, that you forget that actually the people that are around you that are coming in, they are going to be you in X number of years. And so if you're not investing in them and helping them learn and develop, then when the time comes for you to move on, or indeed if you just move on and move into another role, well, who's filling that void? Who's filling that gap?
Yeah.
And that's a massive part of what I try to do and my colleagues try to do in our roles, not just within our own organization, but with partner organizations that we work with, whether they be distributors or even people I meet who are working for our partners and customers. I like to see people develop. If I can help, I'm happy to help. So there's a number of people that I regularly have conversations with and just act as a sounding board, and that's fine because I learn so much from that because their experience of things is different to mine.
Fascinating. Can we talk about then Toro and the golf industry as well and kind of the irrigation design, that kind of stuff? I don't know, were you involved in the design early on when you were at Toro and then kind of grew up through that?
No. So although irrigation was the thread,
Yeah.
or has been throughout my whole career, because after I came back from Egypt, I set up my own business and ran a landscape irrigation design and installation business. When I joined Toro, which again was a moment of sliding doors, because I was getting to a point where the contracting bit I wasn't enjoying anymore, and I wanted to find something else. And I got a phone call from a headhunter who was looking for someone for Toro, and I was just about to accept another job.
Okay.
Literally, it was 4:00 in the afternoon. I was telling my partner I was going to allow him to carry on with the business. I was going to go and find something else. 7:00 that night, I was due to take a job with an Israeli company, actually, a manufacturer of irrigation products, wanted to start importing them to the UK, wanted me to set up a distribution business for them. Didn't really want to do it, but they were going to pay me enough, and I thought, okay, why not? But as I was having this conversation with my partner, his phone went, and it was a headhunter looking for me, and our numbers were 1-digit difference. So anyway, I spoke to him, and that evening I set up an interview with them, and by Friday I had joined Toro.
Wow.
And that, that's 27 years ago. But I mean, literally it was sliding doors at that point. So, but when I had that interview with Toro, there was the guy that I got to know who interviewed me. His name was Bob Buckingham, and he was ended up being a mentor for me.
Yeah.
But we met for half an hour, ended up being 3 hours. By the end of it, felt like we'd known each other forever.
Yeah.
And I said to him, and I was in a very lucky position because I did have a job to go to. I said, look, do you have a job that you'd like to talk about? Because I've got a job to go to. If you don't, then that's fine. And he said, yeah, I've got 3. Which one do you want? Sorry, excuse me. And 2 of them were in the irrigation world.
Yeah.
Golf irrigation, which I had not done. I came out of agriculture and then landscape, hadn't done golf irrigation. So I thought, interesting, but I don't know. And then there was this corporate account role. So the corporate account role was working with our biggest clients, but across equipment, irrigation, and machinery.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I didn't appreciate was how big Toro was on the machinery side. Obviously, I knew about its irrigation because I'd dealt with them before, but the equipment side I didn't appreciate. So I asked him which one I should take, and he said, "Well, I take the corporate account one because you're right in the center of the company. You'll be working across all of our businesses and all of our clients, and anyway, it'd be the most fun." So I said, "Okay, that sounds good."
Yeah.
So I did. So that's what I took. So I didn't actually have an irrigation role.
Okay.
But because I was an irrigation guy and I was living in the UK, we had a distributor here who needed some help. So immediately I was asked if I would take on responsibility for them as a distributor. So I got into it.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the next sort of 10 years, I had multiple different sort of roles, whilst always having this partnership key account role to play. But I was Northern European irrigation sales manager for a while, and then actually ended up taking over the whole team and managed the whole of the irrigation business across Europe, Middle East, Africa. But I was learning all the time about our equipment side, so that became a big piece of my business, my role as well. So, and I think that's why I've stayed. If you think, well, what the heck has he been doing for 25 years plus? Well, the variety of roles has been a huge part of that. The people, and both internally and the customers. There's always variety there. And to this day, every day is different.
I imagine sustainability has always been a topic of conversation as well. It's a bit more of a buzzword now the last 10 years, but I imagine from the start it's always been, how do we kind of maintain our water levels not over?
Oh, hugely. And I think because irrigation management, efficiency, etc., has been a thread right the way through. When you're out in the desert, every drop counts. And so helping people understand what's required and how it can be applied and how it can be managed, that's been really important to me and has been an interest of mine all the way through. I guess what I've been lucky is that, I've always been a passionate sports enthusiast. And so I'm in a position now where I brought those two things together.
Yeah.
And so water management, which is a big part of Toro's business, helping our customers manage the water that they have, applying it correctly, applying it efficiently, and being responsible stewards of that resource is a big part of what we do and is a big part of what I do. I'm always talking to our clients, and particularly new developers, people who are doing it maybe for the first time, and they need to know, I think, some of the key things that they should be paying attention to, and water management is one of them. And in fact, today, if you are planning any form of golf operation, if you don't know what your water supply, the security of your water supply, or where your limitations are, you will not succeed. And so we spend a lot of time working with them, working with golf architects, working with irrigation designers, to make sure that what is being proposed is practical and as efficient as it can be. So yes, sustainability is a huge part. And I think the exciting thing in the industry now, and I've been doing it a little while, and I've always said, the next 10 years is going to be the best 10 years in terms of technology. Well, we're right there now, and finally we're at that point.
Yeah.
So the technology involved in managing water, sensing technology, the application, the control of it, the sophistication of the control systems, the move away from combustion and carbon fuel to electric, the introduction of robotics, the introduction of AI, all of this stuff is available today. And so, and that's what's kept me interested. I've been involved in all of that going through my, when I joined in 2000, I saw our first electric greens mower in 2000, but it didn't come onto the market until 2022, I think. Wow. 21, 22.
Wow.
And the reason for that is that the components of it, although it was possible to do, the components were so expensive or just inefficient that it wasn't a practical option for our customers.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get into that a little bit if you want, but the cost of a battery has gone down dramatically, and that was just like in electric cars, and so everything around the move to electric and robotics, for instance, has taken 20 plus years to get to a point where it's a practical solution, which we have today. And water management, although there's been, I mean, literally when I started, you were still turning valves on by hand. Then there were fairly rudimentary forms of control system. Whereas now you've got a control system which can operate sprinklers or drippers down to the second. You can manage soil moisture content or understand soil moisture content, weather stations, flow meters, all sorts of things which tell you what's going on. Diagnostics on the electrics that tell you what state a particular valve is out on the golf course, so you can preempt it failing, so you can go and fix it before all of this stuff. It's just dreamland. Pump control, all this integration was just dreamland back in even in 2000. So now we're at a point where there's an incredible amount of integrated technology, and it's moving fast. And so it's more relevant than ever because golf courses are under huge pressure in terms of their resource use, and it doesn't have a great reputation. Although actually, ironically, golf does a better job than almost any other sector you can think of. So whether it comes agriculture, industry, urban use, they're all very wasteful of water. Whereas golf courses, because it's a business, they have to manage their water well. They can't afford not to, particularly if they're paying a lot for their water. Now, should they be on the mains? Absolutely not. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of mains use of water, particularly here in the UK. But that's changing, and it will have to change. But good management is in their interest from a commercial point of view, but equally from a turf management point of view. I always joke that pretty much every golf course irrigation system could be turned down by a minimum of at least 10%, and it would do nothing but good. And then you keep winding it down until you get to that edge. And the reason traditionally they're overwatered is because green is good. Green's considered good. No greenkeeper has ever been fired from producing a green golf course, but they have been fired for letting a golf course go brown. So where do they err? They err on the side of caution, so they put more water out than they should do. But actually, as they start to understand how they can manage their water better and how it improves the turf and allows for a better running game, or allows for a better, less disease. If you put too much water and it sits there around in the grass, it can create an environment where disease can thrive. So all you're doing then is just adding to your difficulties in producing, removing disease and producing a good playing surface.
Very interesting. Is it now that something like greenkeepers basically can have the comments because they're getting the data so much that there's more security in their role? Then they can take these risks. There's more data for them. Saying, well, this is the decision we made because we know the data's shown us.
Absolutely. And with all due respect to golf course committees, they don't know what they're talking about most of the time. I mean, it's just a fact. Now, fortunately today we've got more professional managers of golf courses, golf clubs than ever before, and they are getting themselves educated.
Yeah.
And not only that, they trust the professionalism of the greenkeeper because they've been educated now as well to a point where they can explain and show exactly what's going on and why they are making decisions. Our job is to provide them with the information, help them interpret it. So whether that's in terms of data that they can generate or indeed advice and support in terms of, from ourselves. So that has changed a lot in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this. Our systems now can produce reports that will explain exactly, what the water use has been over a period of time. And correlate that with turf health and disease and all sorts of things. I mean, one of the really exciting things that's happening now, and this is where large data collections comes into its own. So we're working with a company who provide a sensor for our machines. So imagine you've got a fairway mower and it's just driving up and down doing its job, but on the back of it is like a flat screen TV, and it's firing microwave into the surface and taking a reading back, and it's creating a map of soil moisture variability in real time.
Wow.
So once it's finished its job, it will have created a map of that fairway, let's say, and it will show you all the variability of soil moisture content. And then the clever bit is that we've created some software where it will that information will get entered into our control system, and it will automatically adjust the irrigation scheduling based on the parameters that you've set for what soil moisture levels you need across different parts of the golf course. So you're going to end up with real-time knowledge of what's going on, and then application as required rather than just blanket application. So we're talking about potentially 20, 30% savings in water.
Wow.
And that's happening right now. So, and it's the first time where we've got an irrigation system and a machinery fleet talking to each other and having a real world, making a real world difference.
And you're taking the people out of it all, basically, aren't you?
Well, what you're doing is you can do, you can have it do it automatically, or it can just give the information to the greenkeeper and say, okay, this is what is the state of play today. Do you want to make these changes?
Okay.
Or you can say, just make the changes.
Yeah.
You can see everything on your iPad or your iPhone or whatever, and you can make those changes, or click a box and say yes, go ahead and do that. So and that's really exciting because what it's doing is it's giving the information to the greenkeeper, allowing them to do things, and then being able to explain that to the committee or the general manager or the owner and say, well, this is what we are doing and this is why we're doing it, and this is why I need you to do X, Y, Z, or we need to invest in this area.
Of course.
And it's making a huge difference already.
Of course. Do you think you're at the peak of technological advancements, or do you think it can go even further?
Well, it'd be very brave of me to say we are, because I'm not Nostradamus. But no, there's more that can be done inevitably, and where will AI come into this in the end? One of the things that, for instance, disease control and how that fits with irrigation as well, because as I say, if you add too much water, if the conditions are right, it can just make disease thrive. I know companies that are investing in forecasting based on weather conditions and therefore disease, creating perfect disease conditioning, therefore predicting and telling you in advance over the course of the next 48 hours, you would be advised to do a preemptive strike for a particular disease to stop it, and of course, reduce and say, okay, you need to reduce moisture levels or you need to increase it, whatever. So all of that stuff is happening as well. So no, I'm sure there is more to come. But I think the big change is golf and golfers recognizing that golf courses will look different. They're going to look different over in the next 10 years, because I don't care how good the technology is and how well you are using every drop you've got. If you've got less to use, then things are going to look different. And that is happening. Every government in every country is looking at how they manage their water for their, for their population. Massive pressure on water use. Golf is not the most important thing in the world. Although it has a part to play. And one of the mantras I suppose I come up with is golf should be seen as part of the solution and not part of the problem. Golf has an opportunity in so many different ways to add value to the community. but it has to be a responsible steward, and it has to engage with the community. There's too much of this, people outside have this exclusive and etc. Whereas in fact, real golf, the golf that we hope that people engage with, is far more community based than that. And there's some wonderful examples all over the world where that's the case.
Yeah.
Where golf clubs have become a really important part of the community. Their relationship with the local schools is so good. The relationship through the health, using golf to help people with their health conditions, the whole environmental piece. There's lots and lots of things that they can do if they approach it like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are some great organizations, GEO, Golf Environment Organization, we're a big supporter of them, and I've worked with them for over a decade. And, I'm really, we're really proud of the work that they've achieved, that they've done to help represent golf out externally to show what was going on, but also educate golfers from the inside and organizations and help them plan a meaningful sustainability strategy, because sustainability is a word that gets bandied around. But true sustainability is not just about the environment and the golf course itself. It's also about how sustainable is the golf club as a business, from a financial point of view, from a membership point of view. It's all together. It's a dynamic thing which changes all the time, and therefore the greenkeeper has to talk to the general manager, has to talk to the finance people as well, and how that works together is really what creates a sustainable.
Of course.
And of course, how it interacts with the community around.
Of course. Okay, one more question on irrigation, and then we'll go into the mindset. And I want to actually it's a bit more, you might not be able to answer, but it's more going back towards the agriculture side of irrigation in the future. Like, what's your thoughts on kind of the agroponics and the kind of vertical farming as a way of actually producing? Because I know, like, I think it's Netherlands produces like the second biggest producer of fruit and vegetables in the world and exports everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the future of farming and actually water management as well? But even though more water might be used, it's recycled, I believe.
Yes, I mean that type of agriculture. Vertical farming, hydroponics, etc., is fascinating, and it allows for a lot of different and interesting things. And again, it's all about managing. How do we feed the population going forward? It's a huge challenge. The population is growing all the time at a rate, particularly in cities, faster than anywhere else. How do we feed them, feed ourselves, and so all options are open to that. And of course, it's up to governments and as well and entrepreneurs, etc., to find a successful way. But managing a finite resource, we're not making water.
Yeah.
Okay. Water gets trapped up in things. So the whole water footprint concept is fascinating as well. It's something which I've always been fascinated in. We are a net importer of water in the products that we buy. As an individual, you think how much water you use in your apartment or in your house, but actually you think of all the water that's tied up in the things that you own.
Yeah, okay.
Which most people don't think about it like that. How much water does it take to make a cup of coffee as opposed to a pint of beer, or indeed just water itself? These things are far more complicated. And the countries of the world that are under the biggest pressure are the ones that are also at the biggest disadvantage.
Yeah.
So we have to, there's some responsibility that we all have to that. But I think the wonderful thing about humans as a species is we are incredibly inventive, obviously. And so there is somebody out there already working on something we have never thought of, which will make a difference. And this is what, again, you will have heard it as well, that, the kids that are going through and entering into school now at sort of 4 or 5 years old, the jobs they're going to do don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
But by the time they get to that point, they will, and they'll be different. And some of these solutions, we have to hope that the people coming through are a bit brighter than we've been, and or build on the things that have been done as we've always done throughout history, and create solutions to some of these problems, which are not going away. They're only going to get more challenging.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
No,
If that
I think
answers
it's
the question or not.
No, I think it does. I think it's fascinating. Okay, let's get to the mindset stuff. What's one lesson about leadership that you wish you knew earlier?
Gosh, well, there are probably a few, but I mean, one springs to mind is you cannot you cannot be the expert and the specialist in everything that you need to know about. So therefore, you have to put people around you or have people around you who actually do know what they're talking about. But you've also then got to have the ability to challenge them. Therefore, you've got to know enough to be able to do that.
Okay.
So again, this is where I talk about being the person in the middle. If you want to be a leader, you essentially are in the middle of an integrated group. You're not at the top, you're in the middle. And if you consider yourself in the middle, your job is to, first of all, put a team together that is actually understands what it is you're trying to achieve. And that's clarity. So you need to give clarity. But equally then, each of them has a role to play, but it is not in isolation. Nobody works in isolation. Whatever your job you're doing, you are relying on other people, you're relying on other disciplines. And the skill of a leader is to, how do you integrate that and make sure that they're all, first of all, they're the right people. And you don't know that necessarily straight away. So you've got to give people a chance. And then secondly, they've got to feel that they're part of something bigger than just themselves. Because if they do feel that and they feel connected, well, then you're going to get people giving their all, their all. And I've learned that over the years. And I suppose I had a sense of it from a while ago, but I've just had more experience of that going through the career.
Fantastic. The fear of failure, did it ever stop you doing something?
Yes, I think. I took some big challenges, particularly that taking that role in Egypt was a huge challenge. I think I was just a bit dumb, really. I think I just, I don't think I knew enough to know that it was a crazy thing to say yes to.
Yeah.
So in a way that didn't really count. But there were many moments once I got going into that role that I suddenly thought, wow, I'm going to have to really, I was literally rereading textbooks that I'd only read 6 months ago before I was delivering a training course. I was literally like, so fear of failure, yes. Fear of not actually being able to manage it, no, not really.
Okay.
Although later in life, when I've had certain roles or certain responsibilities in a more corporate world, which can be less forgiving in some ways, than certainly working in the aid sector and things like that. But in the corporate world, you feel as though everyone's going to know more than you, particularly if you start getting into the finance side of stuff and you're starting to get into the real business end of things. I didn't do a business management degree. I'm surrounded by people with MBAs. The company's full of them, and that's great. But actually what they don't necessarily have is the practical experience, which I've sort of gained over time. Yeah. So I can hold my own in quite a lot of those conversations, but there'll come a point where I'll just go, okay, fine. Yeah. You know what you're talking about. And I'm just going to sit back and watch. And you have to, you have to recognize that, because there's nothing worse than realizing that you've overstretched your knowledge and you're saying something which, first of all, you're not sure is right. And secondly, there's somebody who's receiving it who definitely knows more than you do. Yeah. So, I learned, one of the things I learned quite early on, and this has definitely been useful, is if you think you're going to get yourself into a situation like that, absolutely don't blag. Yeah. Do not blag it. Yeah. Be very honest about what you do and you don't know. Yeah. And if you think you need somebody that does know, then bring them with you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will go and sit in front of a finance director with someone who is an expert in fleet management and fleet investment. I know enough to be useful initially, particularly if I'm talking to the CEO, because he probably doesn't know much more about it either. But when you're getting into the real nitty gritty, you've got to have somebody there that really knows what they're talking about. And because my role is so varied, that could range from agronomy and understanding about a particular disease issue or a particular, and I know enough to get going, but I certainly don't know the answer. So I need to have somebody at that end, right the way through to finance or indeed to robotic technology. Yeah. Again, you cannot expect to be the expert across the board. And if you recognize that, first of all, from an ego point of view, that's not a bad thing to recognize. You're not the expert at everything. But equally, that's how you build a team. Yeah. Because you give people the opportunity to show their expertise and to bring value. Then they feel engaged and they feel a part of something. Yeah, yeah, and have the power. What motivates you when times get tough? well, hopefully the thought that it's only a moment,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be forever, whatever that is. And of course, that depends on what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we all go through moments or periods, personally, where there are big challenges, and you have to go through, you have to push through. You're going to get to the other end. You just have to hope that it's a positive experience at the end. In a work scenario, all businesses go through cycles of challenge, and in over a 25-year period, there's a number. I mean, the irony looking back on the first big financial crisis in sort of that 2008, 2010 timeframe, we thought the world had come to an end, because people could no longer couldn't get credit, therefore they couldn't buy products. So it brought the shutter down. Compared to the COVID pandemic, it was like a speed bump.
Mm.
We literally were covered within 18 months of the credit crisis, and got back to where we needed to be and beyond. But the pandemic brought a different perspective, because it impacted every aspect of what we did and everybody else did. So just because you could see a way through didn't mean everybody, there are lots of things that came into play. So, if you consider that to be, obviously it was a bad time in so many different ways. Have we got through it now? Well, yes, mostly, but there are still lingering elements of that, as there are across society. So the point is, try not to be swamped by it. And that's when you rely on other people around you and you work together. You can't manage anything entirely on your own. Yeah. And if you do, then you're probably putting too much pressure on yourself. Yeah. And you're also not going to get through it as well as you should do, because other people can help. Yeah.
I love that. Jake Humphreys, I saw he did a LinkedIn post this morning. He said his lesson he's teaching his kids is failure is a comma, not a full stop.
Oh, totally. It is. And there are, if you go online now, you can be swamped by those types of comments, and they're great, and they all have at any given moment they can resonate with you, which of course, and there are some generalizations which are always good. I guess this is the way I tend to put this type of thing to young people particularly, is, when they say to me or ask me, how do I become successful? How do I succeed? How do I, and there isn't a magic formula. Of course there isn't, but there's one thing that you can control, which will give you an opportunity, will make a difference. And the way I put it is, try to be someone that other people like to have around. Be that person that brings a positive attitude, a creative attitude, in other words, wanting to contribute. And if you do that, then opportunities will come. People will want to work with you. They'll give you that opportunity. If you're going to be a dickhead, you better be exceptional. Yes. Because that's the only way people will put up with you. Yeah. And I'm sorry to say, you're not exceptional. Yeah. None of us are. Yeah. We might be quite good at something. We might, in our small pond, we might be better than other people, but you'll find a point at which you are no longer that good. So if you're still going to be a dickhead, you will suffer for that, and you will not be given opportunities. The person who's probably less good, but is actually someone people like to have around, that's the person that will get that opportunity. So be that person. And if you coach it in a very sort of, and I use that term specifically because it tends to wake people up when I say it, because it's not what you'd expect, to be told. But it's true. Yeah. It's absolutely true. Yeah. We all know that person, and you don't really want to be that person. Yeah.
No, agreed. Okay, final 3 questions. I love that. I was going to stick with that. Okay, how has your mindset changed towards kind of life and happiness as you've progressed through your career?
Oh, that's a big one. I'm not a particularly ambitious person. Okay. All right. So I've never chased the title. It's just not in me to do that. And I know lots of people, that's how they mark their success, is how far they've got. That's not really been the driving factor for me. So what I have been far more interested in is the experience that I'm having. And I've learned that as I've got older. It is, again, use one of these platitudes, it's not the end, it's the journey, et cetera, and those sorts of things. And that really is true, because I'm very lucky. I've got a great I've got a great role in a great company, in a great industry, and it gives me wonderful experiences daily, not just sporadically. And so I'm content with that, or I'm content in getting the most out of that. That doesn't stop me being inquisitive. It doesn't stop me pushing. It doesn't stop me challenging, etc. All of those things are possible, but I'm doing it from a place where, if nothing else changed, I'm happy, and that feeling that is important. One of the challenges for the current generation coming through is they do want things to move much faster than is actually probably likely and even good for them. If you push too quickly and you move up too fast, or you put yourself in positions, yes, you can be successful, but maybe in a very narrow area. And at any given point, it can change, and it can. So you've got to have a little bit of perspective and the patience. Bring the patience back into it a little bit. Again, doesn't stop you wanting to be successful. Doesn't stop you wanting to push forward. But I would say apply a broader, holistic view to where you are in the world. Enjoy the things that you're doing and get the most out of it. And yes, have some plans for the future where you might want to be, but be ready to change as new opportunities come. Because if you're not open to those opportunities, well, who knows what you're going to miss out on?
Yeah, 100%. And that applies everything to your career up to this point as well. That whole mantra is like everything you've told me is follow that kind of perspective. So I think there's a point proven for people listening as well, that it's not just something said.
I've learned so much from other people who I didn't think I'd ever meet, obviously, because building your network is really key as well, of course, and that's the other thing I would say to people.
Yeah,
build your own personal network, both in your work area and outside your work area.
Yeah, 100%. How important is it to follow your passions and interests in your career?
It can be important.
Okay.
It isn't necessary. Well, most people don't know what their passions are until they might have a passion. I had a passion when I was at school. I played a lot of football, played a lot of rugby, things like that. That was a passion. That has morphed. I never was going to be a professional. And so therefore, my passions have developed over time. It's important to recognize, it's important to have things that you do believe in, or at least have an interest in. But again, that can develop over time too. So be open to the different experiences, and maybe one of them will become a passion. So don't worry about picking something to do now because that's what you're interested in today. That might not stick with you.
Yeah.
And it may well be that something else will develop in you as you get older that actually becomes more important and will guide you in a different way. Yeah. So be open to that too.
Yeah.
So try lots of different things. I think that's probably key as well. Try lots of different things. I played multiple sports and enjoyed all of them. I was never good enough to be a professional at any of them. I also wasn't dedicated enough.
Yeah.
I didn't want to just do one thing.
Yeah.
And of course that has sort of, I suppose, how my career has gone too.
Fascinating. Final question. The one lesson you teach your children about happiness and life?
Well, I think, distilled in some of the things that we've talked about, particularly around trying lots of different things, not being frightened to try things, not feeling as though that you have to have got it right straight away, or you have to know what you're doing straight away. Take on that idea of bringing a positive attitude to things, and creating a reputation for being someone that can be relied on in whatever that means. Relied on to turn up. Big part of being successful is actually just turning up, but turning up with a positive attitude and being somebody that others feel as though they're getting something from that relationship. Because if you take from people and don't give, then I believe that's a negative. You'll have a negative impact, and that will detract from your life as well. So do be someone that brings something to whatever the relationship is that you're in. And apart from that, try to enjoy yourself. Literally just try to enjoy what you're doing, and don't always think about where you want to be too far down the line. Yes, have a perspective, but accept the fact that there's something to be gained from where you are today, and enjoy that, and take your time to develop that as much as you can. I mean, is that a philosophy? I don't know, but it's certainly, it's a way to look at things, I guess. I do feel for kids today who feel as though they have to be head of a department 1 year into their first job. And I know people that have said, well, when am I going to get that next promotion? When am I going to be doing this? Well, it's not right for you yet, and it wouldn't be right for us yet either. And of course, they then move on and they find out that it wasn't what they hoped it was going to be when they did take that opportunity.
Yeah, it's managing the ego in some sense as well, isn't it? Thinking that something like that's going to make you seem valuable to the world.
Yeah, and I don't think it's fair as well, because with social media and everything, people are always seeing what success supposedly looks like.
Yes.
And if they're not there, well, then they're clearly a failure.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
And I had a wonderful conversation with somebody recently who's actually from Ecuador, and we were talking about, he's got an 11-year-old and an 11-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy, and he said, I'm really struggling with being a father. I don't know where the boundaries need to be. I don't know. My wife and I don't get it. And I said, well, first of all, you got to have a united front. But secondly, don't put so much pressure on yourself, but recognize that all those outside influences you have to manage, particularly around social media. I think it's much harder to be a parent today than it was when I was dealing with my son at that age, because it was pre-social media. Yeah. And I really feel for parents who've got to manage that now. That's an outside influence, which is really hard to manage.
Yeah. And it's scary where that might go with AI.
Okay,
Andy,
no, absolutely.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much. This
Pleasure.
has been a fascinating conversation, which really surprised me with the direction we went with everything from actually your schooling and actually taking these risks going to Egypt and the people you met. Really, really interesting. I know that a lot of people who listen will find great value from it. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on the Valley of Outlaws.
Well, thanks, Will. And I've enjoyed it. And sometimes it's interesting to sort of lay it out like that for myself, because you don't really think about it like that. But I appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Valley of Outlaws podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and follow us on Spotify and YouTube.